All right, let's just dive right into it. Today, we're unpacking one of the most widely witnessed anomalous events in modern history. Yep, we're talking about the famous 1997 Phoenix Lights. My goal for this explainer is pretty simple. We're going to stay completely impartial and look at the evidence from literally every conceivable angle. I'm not here to tell you what to think, right? We're just laying out the data, the eyewitness testimonies, and the official records exactly as they appear in the source material. So buckle up, because this is a wildly fascinating journey through a night that literally brought a major American city to a complete standstill.
To really wrap our heads around this, we're going to look through four very distinct lenses today. First, the 1997 mass sighting itself. Second, the wild political turnaround. Third, the planes, flares, and radar debates. And finally, the psychological aftermath. All right, starting with part one, the 1997 mass sighting. A city looks up. So picture this. It's the night of March 13th, 1997, and this massive, completely silent V-shape is being tracked by independent witnesses over hundreds of miles in under an hour. The timeline here is just incredibly tight and super well documented. You've got totally independent people, folks who had absolutely no way of coordinating with each other, reporting these sightings starting right near the Nevada border at around 7:55 p.m. Then this phenomenon makes its way directly over the super crowded grid of Phoenix by 8:30 and eventually just kind of drifts south toward Tucson by 8:45.
Now, the sheer volume of eyewitnesses, that's what really makes this case historic. Former Phoenix City Councilwoman Frances Barwood estimated that at least 10,000 people looked up into the cloudless night sky and saw this thing. 10,000! Just think about that number for a second. That is 10,000 totally independent observers, spread across multiple cities and counties, all sharing this crazy collective experience on a single night.
And you know what's truly mind-blowing here? The consistency of these accounts. Despite being spread out over such a massive area, people were basically describing the exact same thing. They saw a gigantic, low-flying, V-shaped or boomerang formation, studded with these glowing amber orbs of light. A lot of folks estimated the whole thing to be up to a mile wide. But honestly, the most compelling detail to me is that they didn't just see lights. People reported that this object actually physically blocked out the stars as it moved, just gliding, totally silently, right over the valley.
Moving right along to part two, the political turnaround from mockery to admission.
Now, the immediate aftermath of this sighting featured a seriously jarring juxtaposition. Back in '97, Arizona Governor Fife Symington held this huge spoof press conference. He literally paraded his chief of staff into the room in handcuffs, wearing a rubber alien mask. He was basically trying to mock the whole incident and inject some humor, mainly because he felt the city was teetering on the edge of mass hysteria. But here is the kicker. Exactly 10 years later, in a 2007 exclusive interview, Symington did a complete 180. He completely admitted that he was actually an awestruck witness himself that night. He described seeing this enormous, unexplainable craft of unknown origin, and he explicitly said it couldn't have been military flares because the geometric outline was just way too perfectly constant.
And what makes that public mockery even more fascinating is what was actually going on behind closed doors. Behind the scenes of that silly press conference, Symington was actually desperately searching for a terrestrial explanation. I mean, the guy was a former pilot himself. He called up the commander at Luke Air Force Base, the general in charge of the National Guard, the head of the Department of Public Safety, and he came up totally empty-handed. According to Symington, the high-ranking military and police officials he spoke to were just as totally perplexed as the guy on the street.
Which brings us to part three: planes, flares, and radar. The skeptics and the military.
So, while thousands of people were staring up with just their naked eyes, this 21-year-old amateur astronomer named Mitch Stanley was looking through a 10-inch telescope. And this isn't just a toy. This telescope gave him 60 times the resolving power of the human eye. When he aimed it at those lights, he reported seeing the undersides of squarish wings, and he confidently identified them as a formation of ordinary airplanes. His exact words were, "There's no way I could have mistaken that." In fact, he was so absolutely certain they were just planes that he only watched them for like a minute before just turning his telescope back to the stars.
Now, this actually aligns really well with the official military explanation that eventually came out. Military officials pushed back against the whole alien craft idea by stating that citizen airmen from the Maryland Air National Guard were operating over a nearby testing range that night. Specifically, it was a group of 8 A-10 Thunderbolt aircraft from the 104th Fighter Squadron running a routine high-altitude night training exercise called Operation Snowbird.
During this exercise, they were constantly dropping high-intensity parachute illumination flares, which, under the right atmospheric conditions, can be seen from literally hundreds of miles away.
Okay, but what about the radar, right? A lot of witnesses were quick to point out that air traffic controllers at Sky Harbor International Airport detected absolutely nothing on their screens. Well, the military actually had an explanation for that too. You see, in military formations, normally only the lead plane uses a transponder. If that single transponder is turned off, bam, the entire squadron can fly completely undetected by civilian ATC radar. So it's a perfectly logical explanation for that eerie silence on the radar screens, though, to be honest, it still doesn't really satisfy the eyewitnesses who fiercely insist they saw one solid, mile-wide object instead of a bunch of separate planes. Now, you're probably wondering, if it was just a routine flare drop, why on earth did it take the military almost 5 months to tell the panicked public about it? A lot of people instantly cried cover-up, but military spokespeople insisted the delay was really just a mundane bureaucratic mix-up. When those initial inquiries went out, personnel at the Davis-Monthan base checked their resident flight logs, which obviously showed zero local activity. It actually took months for someone to realize, oh wait, we should probably check the visiting unit logs, and that's what finally revealed the presence of the Maryland Air National Guard.
All right, let's pivot to part 4. The psychological aftermath. What the lights did to people.
Stepping away from the debate over what the lights actually were for a second, let's look at the very real, measurable impact they had. Grounding this in hard data from a peer-reviewed study in the Journal of Scientific Exploration, we can clearly see how deeply entrenched the witnesses' beliefs still are. Check this out. Despite the military's very detailed explanation about A-10 thunderbolts and flares, a massive 63% of surveyed witnesses still firmly believe they saw an extraterrestrial spacecraft. Only 2% think it was flares or a drone. Basically, this experience was so incredibly profound and visually convincing to the folks on the ground that the official terrestrial explanations just kind of bounced right off them.
But holding on to those beliefs? That came with a pretty heavy social cost. It is really striking to see the profound social stigma attached to this event. The data shows that 14% of witnesses actively hid their sighting from their own immediate family because they were terrified of being ridiculed. Others said that family members reacted with straight-up anger or just refused to even talk about it. It really highlights how deeply isolating encountering the unknown can be, you know? Sharing a genuine, mind-blowing moment of awe could literally lead to being labeled crazy by the people you love most.
Yet despite all that stigma and isolation, academic studies revealed something kind of beautiful about the aftermath. Using standardized psychological tests, researchers found that these witnesses actually underwent some incredibly positive, transformative life changes. As a direct result of the sighting, witnesses reported having an enhanced inner spiritual life, significantly more empathy for others, a lowered fear of death, and they cared way less about material wealth and social status. They also felt this much greater connection with nature and ecology. So whatever it was, this event acted as a massive catalyst for these huge pro-social attitude changes.
Which brings us to the end of our explainer today, and it leaves us with this super fascinating final thought. We've looked at the massive scale of the sightings, the political U-turns, the military's flare explanations, and all this profound psychological data. But the ultimate question really remains. Regardless of what was actually flying in the Arizona sky that night, whether it was an earthly military exercise executed to perfection or some genuinely anomalous craft from somewhere else completely, what is it about encountering the unknown that has the power to so radically change the human heart? Thank you so much for exploring the data with me today, and I really hope this gives you something profound to chew on until next time.